Hello everyone, I'm Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's episode of Tarot in the Times of. I thought about filming this episode for a while now, but originally I wanted to call it Tarot in the Times of Fear. But for some reason, it just didn't work. And then I asked myself, what was the reason behind this fear? And what is the reason behind the constant anxiety that we're feeling? And that's when I realized that what I wanted to talk about is not fear itself, but the reason why we are so scared of something, the reason why we're so confused or anxious about something. And I realized that this all comes from uncertainty. So welcome to the episode Tarot in the Times of Uncertainty. As usual, I'm just going to show you some of the decks that I may use today. And because I just don't want to talk on an empty screen, and I do like to myself to look at the cards. So this first deck is the Inkwitch Tarot deck by Eric Mell. All of the decks that I'm choosing today are decks that are somehow, or I see them at least, as modern decks. And let me explain why. Well, first of all, we need to look at what we're going to talk about today. So tarot in the times of uncertainty. Nowadays, we tend to see fear as something that needs to be overcome. And while I agree that living in constant fear and anxiety is making us miserable and it needs to be addressed as an issue, I have a different approach when it comes to how to deal with it. So finding an effective way of dealing with it. But let's look at the root of this fear. So I believe that we live in uncertain times. We are constantly bombarded with information. And if you look at platforms like, for example, Twitter, you'll see that we have access to, on a live basis, to pretty much news about everything and the opposite of everything. We are constantly told that something is happening and it's something terrible. And we are constantly told that we need to do something about it, that we need to prepare ourselves for that, that we need to be scared about it, that we need to be concerned about it. Now, the problem is that there is so much confusion about anything that is going on that even when we want to activate ourselves, when we do want to do something about it, we want to get prepared, we get easily lost in the notions of opinions. And most of the time, these opinions are actually contradicting themselves. Since we're all human beings, it's absolutely natural to feel confused and disoriented. It is perfectly acceptable not to know what to do, and it is not a shame to experience anxiety and fear. I really want to make this point very clear. There is nothing wrong about feeling scared or anxious about something. Let's have a look at another deck. So this was the Inkwitch Tarot by Eric Mell. I also want to show you the Savvy Soul Tarot, one of my favorite ones, by Julie Whitelish. You can probably tell that these two decks have a similar feel, definitely different artwork, of course, but it's similar, kind of a similar feel to them. The images portrayed are very modern or are evocative of modern times, and that's why I've chosen them. So we agree that it's all human being afraid of something, feeling confused about something, feeling disoriented and anxious about something. It is normal. You see, even on this though, there's a bit of a contradiction. So on the one hand, we're constantly told that we should be scared about something that is happening, but we're also at the same time told that we need to overcome our fears. It is generally acceptable in our society to be afraid of something that is threatening our well-being, our lives, but we're also expected to do something about it, be very active about it. in my experience, and I want to repeat that, in my experience, so the reason why I'm saying that and repeating that is that, as my usual disclaimer, I am not a licensed therapist. No, I don't work as a healthcare worker. And I believe that whenever someone is subject to fear or anxiety and feels like they need help, they should absolutely seek help. I've said that many times. This series of episodes that I'm showing you today and other days, tarot in the times of anxiety, tarot in the times of grief, tarot in time of trauma, are videos that I'm showing to you because I'm sharing with you my very own experience. And my very own experience may have worked for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will work for other people. So it is not a recommendation. What I do recommend is that you seek help. If something is so strong and you feel like your life is miserable, you feel like you're incapacitated, you feel like you have a burden to carry, then absolutely seek professional help. However, I feel that it is very insightful to hear other people's experiences in how they deal with these kind of human emotions, for example, because fear is a very basic human emotion. And so I thought, if I do share my own experience, perhaps it will resonate with someone else, perhaps maybe just a few people, perhaps maybe just one person. But let me tell you, if it does resonate, if it only just one person, it would have made it worth it. So that's the reason, that's the main reason why I'm doing it. And it's also because I do use tarot for personal growth, and I do believe in the power of tarot as an introspective tool, not just as divination, but as literally as an introspection kind of tool. And I believe that the most important thing that you can do, in my experience, again, when you fear something, when you are exposed to anxiety and confusion, is to take a step back. But let's have a look at another tarot that I'm going to show you today. And I have to zoom out. So this is the Global Fusion Intuitive Tarot by Wayne Rodney. And the reason why I'm using this tarot as well is because this tarot, like the other ones that we've seen so far, has to me the kind of modern feel that I'm looking for in today's episode. So I was saying the only thing that works for me is to take a step back and ground myself. Take comfort and calm from things that I know will always be true. If I feel confused about something, if I don't know what to think, if I don't know who to believe, if all of the news around me are contradicting themselves, I take a step back and I just look and seek connections with people that I know will always be there for me. Not necessarily because their opinion will be the opinion that I ultimately want to follow, that I ultimately want to listen to, but because when we experience fear, let me tell you, from a neurological point of view, you might be familiar with this, but fear is experienced in the amygdala. So the amygdala is a part of the brain where there's brain activity whenever we are confronted with a situation that poses, or we believe poses, threats to our life. So normally we talk about fight or flight reactions, and these take place in the amygdala. And I can assure you there is absolutely no reason to believe that someone that is courageous will fight, and someone that is not courageous will flight. It is actually unpredictable. I just give you a very funny, because it is a very funny example. It is my personal life, so I can share it with you. Once I was having lunch with my dad. It was summertime, so all the windows and the balcony was open. and we were just having lunch. At a certain point, I see a shadow coming from the kitchen. I could see from the room where we were having lunch, looking up in the corridor, and I see the shadow coming from the kitchen, and it was just my dad and me, and my dad was sitting next to me. So who the hell was that? This shadow, at first I thought, oh, it may have been a curtain, but immediately I could recognize the silhouette of a person. It was a person, it was an intruder. Okay, so what I did, my amygdala, very funnily, decided that I am one of those who decides to fight instead of flying. So I literally stood up and I made my way, and I think I even had my, my hands on my hips, as in I was kind of in a very aggressive stance. And I make my way to the kitchen to confront this intruder. Now, just to give you a little bit of a background, my dad he's not alive anymore, but he was almost 2 meters tall, and he was a very bulky person, very strong. Even when he was in his 80s, he kept on jogging, he kept on running, doing exercises. He was a strong person. I'm tiny, okay? Compared to my dad, for sure, I am a tiny person. The logical thing to do in that case would have been to alert my dad and say, could you please check what's going on in the kitchen? There is someone there. But no, my amygdala decided that the best thing to do was to confront the intruder myself. So I went to the kitchen, and it was indeed an intruder, but he wasn't someone we didn't know. It was actually someone who was painting my dad's couple of rooms, and our bell, turns out our bell did not work, has stopped working for some reason we didn't know. So this poor guy had been waiting outside for like an hour trying to call us, but the phone was not installed yet because my dad had just moved. He didn't have my mobile number, and so it was just, at the end of his rope, this guy just decided to climb on top of the balcony and let himself in by the kitchen. I am not going to discuss whether that was okay to do or not, but this was just to make you laugh and to show you that yours truly, when confronted with something, instead of doing the smart thing to do, she opted for the stupid thing to do. So yeah, that was it. But let's have a look at another deck. So this was the Global Fusion Intuitive Tarot by Wayne Radney. And now let's have a look at a couple of oracle decks. So this is the Sacred Rebels Oracle by Elena Fairchild, and the artwork is by Autumn Sky. I really like this oracle. I use it very often when I do readings for clients for the send-off message. I think it's got some very powerful kind of messages depicted in the cards. So going back to what I was telling you, the most important thing then, the only thing that actually worked for me was to take a step back and retrench and reconnect. Look at the things that were eternal for me, that the things that I knew were never going to be confrontational, were never going to be contradictory, and the connections with the people that I know will always be there for me. This way, it's a very well-known practice of self-soothing. So if you find yourself confronted in an environment which is provoking confusion, fear, and anxiety in yourself, the way to overcome that, a way to step away from that, is to go back to something that makes you feel safe, something that makes you feel like you know what you're doing, there's no confusion around you, everything is grounded, and that helps you get grounded as well. But there's something that I think is very useful to remember, and it's this. This may not work for everyone, and absolutely, if there's something else that works for you, go for it. Absolutely. However, there is something that I think is universal, and it is that trying to fight something that scares you, especially when you don't exactly know where that fear is coming from and how that fear is affecting you and your life, is a recipe for disaster. That is something I am 1000% convinced of. So these are the decks that I'm going to integrate, that I always integrate into my practice whenever I use a tarot in time of uncertainty. And let's have a look at a very specific spread that I created to use also with these decks or other decks, but to use in order to overcome this fear and this anxiety. Okay, for the spread, I'm going to use the Savvy Soul Tarot by Julie Whitelish. And the first position, the first card that we're going to look at is the card that most represents what you're afraid of, what creates confusion, what creates uncertainty, what creates anxiety. Now, this is not a pull. It's literally a pick, in the sense that I want you to go through the deck. And if you know it already, if there's a card that represents your fear, then go directly for this card. If you're uncertain about what card may best represent what you're feeling, then just go through the deck and pick a card that speaks to you of the fear you're experiencing. Now, in my case, I know, and I've known for a certain time, that my confusion, my uncertainty, my anxiety is best represented by the Five of Pentacles in the traditional depiction of the Five of Pentacles. But I also really like a couple of decks, the representation of a couple of decks of this card. In particular, in the Five of Pentacles, you can see here there's a person holding a sign, and this sign says seeking human kindness, and it looks like the traditional way in the RWS is to be left out in the cold, so you can actually see what will be on the other side of the door. But this person, or us, we are being left out. We're being left out of something that is happening on the other side. And what's happening on the other side is connection. I don't know if you can see, there is what appears to be a mother with their own child. You know, the traditional depiction is of a church. So you can see the cross here and the pentacles, the Five Pentacles here. I'm not interested in the symbolism related to the location. What I'm interested in is expressing this feeling of being left out, of warmth and home and connections. So this person is literally just pushed away, pushed out, pushed away, and they're seeking human kindness. Now, I really love this tarot because there's always a bit of a key phrase at the bottom of each card, and it really sums up the sense of the card. So in this case, I read here, a victim mindset often creates situations of suffering. This, for me, is very personal, and I have no problems in sharing that. Is what I'm actually confused about. I do fear being left out in the cold. I do fear being left alone, being abandoned. It obviously comes from episodes that happened in my life. It's also very representative for me of the suit of Pentacles, because my fear is also bringing, it's never coming by itself, it's also accompanied by fear of disaster. It could be economical, financial disaster, it could be, you know, not even a disaster, it could be just a setback. But because in the last 2-3 years, because of what happened in the world in the last 2-3 years, and it's still happening, there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to financial aspects of my life, for example, and there is a lot of struggle, and I'm not the only one. I actually feel like there's a lot of us in this situation right now. And so we're not at panic stage yet, but It is something that is always there in the back of our minds, and we keep on thinking about it, and it is what creates confusion. We do not know what's going to happen. Perhaps my income, for example, is related to the financial market. So the financial market is in very uncertain and uncharted territory. We don't really know what's going to happen with the high inflation and rising rates. If you know anything about economics, you will know that there's nothing certain, and that is the reason why I, myself, and others in this situation feel like we don't know if we have control over this. So this is, the Five of Pentacles is a great card for me to represent my fear. So this is position number 1, and I'm actually going to put it in the middle. I obviously have to zoom out. There you go. So what I'm going to do, this is a picked card. So I want you to pick a card that best represents your fear or anxiety or uncertainty. Then I'm just going to shuffle the deck. So now what we're going to do, we're going to pull 3 cards which will represent aspects where my fear is paralyzing me. Okay. So we've got the 4 of coins. Well, that makes sense. As usual, I'm always very conscious about the frame. The Tower, which is even more pertinent. And Justice. See, I know I've said this before, and I'll never stop saying it, but there's no sample reading. Or at least with me, I just cannot do a 100% sample reading. There is just so much energy that is channeled through these cards, especially probably because it's one of my favorite decks, and we have a really great communication going on, and this deck knows me. But this is exactly it. So obviously these are 3 aspects where my fear is embodying itself. So the 4 of coins is that I'm obviously referring to the financial aspect of the 5 of coins. So I'm worried that my certainty, everything that I base my life upon will collapse. Which is brought on by the Tower, even more so, obviously. And this is a castle in the sand. How easy, you tell me, how easy it is to just destroy a castle made of sand. So my fear is insinuating that everything that I built my life upon is made of sand. So it's actually very, very easy to collapse. And my fear is also of justice. Now, this is basically something that has been a very, let's say, permanent aspect of all of my life. So I've always been very scared, anxious about injustice. So whenever the scale of justice are, heavier on one side or the other, whenever they are not balanced, whenever there is this lack of balance, that to me is very uncertain. It really exposes me to fear, uncertainty, and anxiety. Injustice in particular, but justice in this case, it's almost as if we would need to read this card reverse. As I've said many times, I don't need reversals per se, but I do believe that many cards in specially created spreads need to be read as in reverse position. So what is my fear provoking? Where do I need to look my fear in my life? What aspects do I see my fear embodied in my life? Certainly in my stability, certainly, and this is echoed pretty much, and it's a fear that makes me anxious about everything that I've built so far, everything that I've done so far, and I'm really concerned that it might collapse because perhaps it's not founded in something solid. And I'm also really worried about being the victim of injustice. There is something that it's incredibly powerful to me, this reading. So now that I've done this, I've actually raised the level of fear. So we have identified something in a card, in a tarot card, that represents the object of my fear. We have looked in concrete at 3 aspects of my life where I'm worried, I'm anxious that this fear can eventuate, can happen. Now that we have raised this level of fear, what we need to do is to take a step back, as I said before, take a step back, ground myself. Think about what makes me feel safe. Think about things that I believe will never create confusions for me, or connections with people that will always be there for me. Once I'm self-soothing, what I can do, I will see that this fear is still there. It's not like it goes away. I'm a firm believer that we can actually use fear as a catalyst. If we use fear as a catalyst, we extrapolate fear and we take what we need out of it. Now, on a neurological and physiological level, fear is made of adrenaline. Now, adrenaline is extremely helpful, it's extremely useful to overcome obstacles and situations where we need to be in top shape. Both physically, spiritually, mentally, we need to be in top shape. If we use adrenaline as our ally, as our weapon, we can actually turn around the effects of fear in our life and use it to our own advantage. Now, once that I prep myself doing that, first I have identified the actions, the affections of fear in my life. Then I've taken a step back, I have grounded myself, I have self-soothed myself into recognizing what I actually believe is safe. And now I'm going to use the adrenaline of fear to find three aspects of my life where I can actually use it as a catalyst instead. Now, I'm going to shuffle again. Okay, so I'm just gonna put these ones up because otherwise I'm not gonna have enough room for another 3 cards. Of course, so we've got, as you can see, we've got the, no, you can't see because they're at the bottom, so let's do this. Maybe it's a bit easier to read. So we have got the 2 of Wands, the Ace of Pentacles, and the 3 of Pentacles. As I said, you know, as I wanted to demonstrate, there is no sample reading. So this is an actual reading for me. Well, there you go. So what I can use my fear for is, as a catalyst for, is the 2 of Wands. The 2 of Wands is all about recognizing that what is around you doesn't suit you anymore. It may be a very good situation. It may be a very relaxing and positive environment. However, it is not a challenging environment anymore. Therefore, we need to look at the world in a different way. We need to start making plans to do something that puts it out there, that challenges us, perhaps. This adrenaline, the fear that I had about losing everything that is around me, everything that I have built so far, I should use this not to just feel paralyzed and not do anything about it, but just accept this fear and use it in such a way that I can plan something else. I can start planning again. Be positive. Look at the future. Look at something that you can do. And this is reinforced by the Ace of Pentacles. If I was worried about all the projects that I have that they will be collapsing around me, then I need to embark upon this journey in this, maybe reconnect with nature as well, because the suit of pentacles is not just the suit of, you know, projects or financial related things. It's also the suit of reconnecting with nature. But in any case, it's reinforcing the fact that I need to make new plans and I need to be positive about it, because everything new can bring something positive. And the Three of Pentacles even more so, because it's telling me to perhaps seek connections, perhaps work in a team, perhaps don't do things alone, because it looks as if this Four of Pentacles was, yes, it was the base of the foundation of what I have, of what I built for myself, but perhaps I did it the wrong way because I was on my own. Perhaps the reason why I'm so worried now that it's going to collapse comes from the fact that I did not use any other person with me. I did not use a team. I did everything on my own. Perhaps if I had been availing myself of the help of a team, right now I would not be so worried, because in a team, you have a bad day, someone else will take over. If it's a functioning team, obviously. So this is, it ended up being a very personal spread. Apologies for that, but it's also the reason why I'm doing this, the reason why I'm looking at tarot this way, because perhaps these words will resonate with someone else. And if it does, please let me know. It actually makes me really happy when that happens. Now at the end, I always like to conclude with a positive message, and I would do that by picking a card. I don't think I've shown this deck before. It's the Lantern Oracle by Angelina Mirabito and illustrated by Yuli Alejo. And but you can use another oracle, of course. The reason why I'm picking this one is because it's it's new in my collection, and I really like using it. Just showing you quickly. I find it very insightful. Whenever I do a reading like this, you also have to keep in mind that there's a lot of human emotions involved in the spread. So we have been looking at fear, and we have been analyzing it, and we have been identifying the aspects, the key aspects in our lives where fear is acting. And therefore, we need something that is soothing at the end. We need something that balances out the shot of adrenaline that we had during the reading. So I think that this, you know, the Lantern Oracle, but also you could use, for example, off the top of my head, the Amenti Oracle, or what's it called, the Modern Nirvana Oracle, just as long as it's an oracle that is calm and not confronting. Like, I wouldn't use the Reclaim Oracle. I love it, but I wouldn't use it in this case. And I wouldn't use, for example, the Poesis, because they are slightly more confrontational. So in this case, I'm using the Lantern Oracle. I'm going to shuffle it. So this is the card that actually jumped out when I was shuffling, and I don't always read jumpers. I don't know if you do. There's no right or wrong way to do that. If you feel like you need to read a jumper, by all means, read a jumper. If you feel like a jumper is just whatever it is, it's just, you know, shuffling gone wrong, don't read it. But in my case, I felt like I needed to read this. And I had a look, and I looked at the title. It says Radical Self-Acceptance. You are perceived the way you perceive yourself. This card is a very powerful message for me, because what we've seen today, this fear that I have that everything will be collapsing around me because of the times of uncertainty we're living, also triggers in me the sense of not being accepted. So the Five of Pentacles is you're being left out in the cold because you have not been accepted. And the fact that I know that this fear of not being accepted stems from my own unacceptance of myself, my own struggle with accepting myself. And so the fact that this oracle chose this card as a jumper to let me know that I should definitely concentrate on radical. It's not just, mind you, it's not just self-acceptance, it's radical. Radical means 100%, but it also means that it's out of the ordinary for me. Radical means that you are committed 100%, even though it might be a struggle, it might be a bit difficult. So you are perceived the way you perceive yourself. That is something I definitely need to work on, and so that's for me, that's a message for me. But I think that you get a sense of what I was trying to do in this case, in this spread. So thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. If you feel like these words resonated with you, please let me know in the comments below. I will put a link for all of the decks that I've shown today in the description box below. If you like this episode of Tarot in the Times of, there will be more to come. So please consider subscribing to my channel. Have a great day.